and welcome to Live Parkinson's, Live an Exceptional Life. I'm your host, Chris Custenbotter, and I've been living an exceptional life with Parkinson's for the past 15 years. Today, we're going to be diving into something that every single person in the Parkinson's community has felt. That's right, stress. We're not talking about the vague, well, I'm kind of busy, but the real biological stress that makes your tremors increase. It's going to slow your movement, and sometimes it makes your brain feel like it's running through mud because you have trouble thinking. So if you've ever had a moment where life gets overwhelming, maybe you've had a tough conversation with somebody, you had a deadline that you had to meet, or maybe you're just sitting in traffic stuck somewhere, and then suddenly your tremor spikes and or your feet freeze to the floor, you're really not imagining it. Stress has a measurable biological impact on our Parkinson's symptoms. So today we're going to break down exactly why stress has such a big effect on Parkinson's, and we're going to use some of the strongest research that we have. Then we'll talk about what you can do. So I'm going to give you some practical science-backed tools that you can start using today to protect your dopamine, calm your nervous system, and feel more in control. Okay, so what is stress? Well, stress isn't just an emotion. It's a full body alarm system. So when your brain senses a threat, physical, whether someone's coming after you, emotional, maybe you're worried about something, you're stressed over something that's coming up, or even social. Maybe you have to stand up and give a presentation in front of people. It activates the HPA axis. And you're saying, what is the HPA axis? Well, the HPA axis stands for hippocampus pituitary adrenal axis. And what that does is it releases cortisol, adrenaline, and norepinephrine. And you might have heard of some of those as the fight or flight system, where your body wants to flee. Now, in most people, once the stress passes, the system is going to reset itself. But in Parkinson's, the brain's already working with a limited amount of dopamine, as we all know. So stress is going to drain that dopamine even faster. There's a study that says that in the brain that is already struggling with dopamine deficiency, the activation of this HPA axis can actually squeeze out and rapidly deplete the last remaining drops of your available dopamine. And that comes from a major review that was titled An Integrated Review of Psychological Stress in Parkinson's Disease, Biological Mechanisms and Symptoms and Health Outcomes. Now that's a big mouthful. And it was published in the Journal of Progress in Neuropsychopharmacology and Biological Psychiatry by Dr. Elizabeth Hammerell and colleagues back in 2016. And what the review did is it pulled together decades of research on stress and Parkinson's. And what it showed was that stress rapidly depletes dopamine. It activates microglia, that's your brain's immune cells, which can cause neuroinflammation and increase oxidative stress as well. And it also places extra strain on your substantia nigra, and that's the very region that produces dopamine in our brain, and which is already affected by Parkinson's. So in other words, stress doesn't just feel bad, it's going to create a biological storm that directly impacts our Parkinson's symptoms. And then there was another big study that was done, and it's some of the strongest clinical evidence that we have that stress has a big effect on Parkinson's. And it was titled Stress and Mindfulness in Parkinson's Disease, a survey of 5,000 patients. And it was published in NPJ Parkinson's Disease Journal in 2021. And there's a quote in there that said that tremor was found to be the single most stress-sensitive symptom. 81.8% of patients reported that acute stress directly and significantly worsened their tremor. I know that's what happens in my case. When I get stressed, my tremor really increases. And this was the largest stress PD study that was ever conducted. And I just want to share some of the key findings with you because I think they're important. And I just mentioned that 81.8% reported stress worsened their tremor, but stress also worsened their bradykinesia or slowness of movement, their gait or their walking, and dyskinesias. Stress also triggered cognitive issues, memory blocks, trouble focusing, and executive dysfunction, meaning having trouble organizing and planning things. Stress also worsened speech and communication, and it increased physical pain. And then high stress was strongly linked to rumination. And you're thinking, what's rumination? Is that something that when cows are chewing on their cud, is they're ruminating? Well, rumination is actually repetitive negative thinking. It keeps you in this negative cycle. And what they found was that this rumination or this repetitive negative thinking predicted a lower quality of life. So this study just didn't confirm what people feel, it quantified it. So it took all these 5,000 surveys of people with PD and controls and found that stress has a great impact on your Parkinson's symptoms. And then there was another study called Does Psychological Stress Affect the Progression of Parkinson's Disease? And that was published in Neurology in 2017. And what this study did is it used data from 4,155 patients that participated in the National Parkinson's Foundation Quality Improvement Initiative. And what they did is they created what they called an excess stress score. And what it did is it measured emotional stress beyond the stress of having PD. So we all know that PD is stressful, but what they wanted to look at was how does stress affect people beyond their Parkinson's symptoms? And the key finding was that higher emotional stress predicted faster motor decline over time, which I think if we all know if you have Parkinson's and you experience a lot of stress, that your symptoms get worse. At least that's the way it is in my case. And they found that a high baseline stress score was a statistically significant predictor of worsening physical mobility and faster motor decline. So this was one of the first studies to suggest that stress may influence the disease progression. So the more that you're stressed all the time, that could have an impact on your disease progression, and it's definitely going to have an impact on your symptoms. And then one final study was titled Alleviating Stress in Parkinson's Disease, Symptomatic Treatment, Disease Modification, or Both. And that was published in the journal Parkinson's Disease in 2024. And what this was is it was a follow-up paper, and it confirmed that reducing stress may have a disease-modifying potential. So that means that it might slow the underlying progression by reducing neuroinflammation. Because remember, when you get stressed, that's going to have an effect on those microglia, the brain immune cells that are going to have an effect on neuroinflammation, and then that's going to damage your cells that produce dopamine. So the powerful message from this was that stress management isn't optional. It's part of your medical toolkit. All right, so that was the science behind it. Now let's talk about what you can do in practical everyday terms, because it's nice to know that, yes, stress does cause increased motor symptoms. It also affects our non-motor symptoms. Besides, it affects sleep and our thinking and some other things. So how can we help to reduce stress in our daily lives to help us live a better life? And the first one is mindfulness and meditation. In the 2021 study that found that 64% saw major anxiety reductions by doing mindfulness and meditation. And another 60.2% saw improved mood, and both increased with frequency. So the more you did mindfulness or meditation techniques, the better your outcomes. So mindfulness isn't just about clearing your mind, it's about training your attention. So how do we practice mindfulness and meditation? It's nice to say, well, just go do mindfulness and meditation practices. Well, there's a simple 5-minute mindfulness routine that you can do. First thing is you want to sit comfortably, close your eyes, or just lighten your gaze. And then next thing you want to do is focus on your breath. Focus on the cool air coming in through your nose and then the warm air going out through your mouth. Now, when your mind wanders, and it's going to, just acknowledge the thought, but then gently bring it back to focusing on your breath coming in and going out. So there's no judgment, no frustration, just return to your breathing. So you're going to have thoughts coming in and out of your head. Just relax, let them pass, and then go back to focusing on your breathing. Now, why this works? Mindfulness is going to help to lower your cortisol. It's going to help calm that system, the HPA axis, that's going to release the cortisol and the adrenaline that's going to get you ready for the fight or flight scenario. It's going to reduce rumination. So it's going to reduce those cycles of negative thoughts. It's going to improve your emotional regulation, and it's going to increase your dopamine efficiency. And then it's also going to help us with our attention, planning, and decision making. So it's a win-win-win for all those. Now, there are apps out there like Headspace and Calm or Insight Timer. They can help you guide you through some of the meditation. But there's also, if you go to YouTube or some of the other places on the internet, you can find free ways to practice mindfulness as well. All right, next up is box breathing. Now, this is going to be your stress circuit breaker. And it's a technique used by the Navy SEALs, used by elite athletes, and also people with Parkinson's. So how do you do box breathing? No, you don't put a box over your head and breathe into a box. So here's how to do it. You're going to inhale through your nose for a count of 4. You're going to hold it for a count of 4. And then you're going to exhale through your mouth for a count of 4. And then you're going to hold that empty breath for a count of 4. And you're going to do that 3 to 4 times. Okay, why does it work? Well, it's going to help to lower your heart rate. It's going to reduce the cortisol, which is one of the stress hormones. It's going to activate your parasympathetic nervous system to help calm you down. And it interrupts the fight or flight response. So you can't be panicking and calm at the same time. So if you're slowing your breathing and you're holding it and slowing it down, that's telling your brain, hey, it's time to relax. So you can't be panicked and relaxed at the same time. And that's going to improve the oxygen flow to your brain. So it works fast. It's discreet. You can do it anywhere. If you get nervous in the store or you're feeling stressed somewhere, you can do it anywhere and nobody's really going to notice. And it's incredibly effective. It's going to help. I've done it myself. It's going to help bring your level of anxiety and stress down and help you stay calm and reduce that stress. Number 3 is high intensity and rhythmic exercise. All right. Intense exercise, as I talked about in some of my other podcasts, intense exercise fundamentally optimizes the brain's remaining dopaminergic pathways, and it floods the brain with the brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is like the fertilizer for your brain cells. So the more you exercise, that's going to help with your dopamine production and the pathways that lead to that. So what counts as high-intensity exercise? Now, high intensity doesn't mean dangerous, doesn't mean go out there and try to run on the treadmill at 10 miles an hour. But what it does, it means challenging your body enough to raise your heart rate. And that could be through cycling, non-contact boxing, unless you like to get punched, which I don't particularly, high tempo aerobics, and that could be things like Zumba, some other dance classes, power walking with intervals. And what does that mean? That means let's say you're walking at 3 miles an hour, and then for 30 seconds you speed up and walk faster for 30 seconds, and then you slow down and you keep repeating that. That would be interval walking. And again, dance classes and Tai Chi with strong intentional movement, so that you've seen these commercials on Facebook and other places for Tai Chi walking, Tai Chi chair exercises, those type of things is what they're talking about. Now, why does it matter? Well, high intensity exercise is going to increase the amount of dopamine that we release. It's going to improve the sensitivity of the receptors that receive the dopamine. It's going to reduce the cortisol or the stress hormone, and it's going to help improve our gait, our balance, and our motor control. And another nice thing about exercise as well is it helps to reduce anxiety and depression, which are pretty substantial in people with Parkinson's. And then the Lancet Neurology reviewed showed that exercise is one of the strongest non-pharmaceutical interventions for Parkinson's. And you've heard me say that time and time again, that exercise is almost as important as your medication. So try to exercise a little bit every day, whether it's you do it all at once or you break it down into segments. And then finally, number 4, social connection. In the study that showed that stress and rumination are deeply connected, isolation is going to make both worse. So when you're stressed and you get into that negative thought cycle, if you're by yourself, it's going to make it worse, because then you're just going to sit and keep thinking over and over again of all the negative things that are going on. So why does social connection matter? Well, it's going to help to reduce the cortisol. That's our stress hormone. It's going to increase oxytocin. And oxytocin is that connection hormone that helps us feel connected to other people. It's going to interrupt rumination. If you're talking to other people and you're socializing, you don't have time to think about all those negative thoughts. And then it's going to improve your mood. It's going to strengthen your cognitive function. And it's going to improve your resilience and improve your quality of life. So there's a lot of benefits that social interaction is very, very important. It's going to help you prevent social isolation. So how can we stay socially connected? Let me give you some practical ways. You can join a Parkinson's movement class. I've participated in a number of those. You can attend support groups, whether they be local in your community or virtual, that you can sit at home and do it on a computer, but still have connection with others. Here's another big one that I really enjoy, is that volunteering in your community. When you help others, you have a social connection, but you're also not thinking about the problems that you have, and that's going to help you reduce your stress. You can join a faith-based or hobby group. Maybe you like to do woodworking and there's a woodworking group, or there's a musical group or an art group that you want to participate in. You can also participate in alumni networks. Maybe you graduated from high school and you're on the committee for scheduling the reunions, or something in college that you did that you can get together with alumni. You can call or meet a friend weekly. Maybe you get together once a week for coffee or lunch, or you just call and follow up and see how they're doing. You can join online PD communities. There's a ton of them out there. And then you can attend local events or workshops. There's a lot of PD workshops, but there's workshops on adult education where you want to learn something new, where the speaker comes in and there's no test. You just sit and listen, and you can learn something new. So community isn't just about emotional support. It's about biological protection. All right, so living with Parkinson's is a marathon, which we all know. Stress is going to show up. That's just part of being human. But what the science tells us is pretty empowering. You have real, effective tools to influence how your body responds. So we talked about mindfulness, we talked about the box breathing, movement, and community. So all four of those things are going to help reduce your stress, help reduce the symptoms that you have, and maybe hopefully slow your progression down. So these aren't just nice habits, they're medical interventions. They're going to change your brain chemistry. They protect your dopamine, they reduce the inflammation, but more importantly, they help you stay in the driver's seat of your own life. You're not letting Parkinson's drive the bus or stress drive the bus. You're driving the bus. So on hard days, which we're all going to have, be gentle with yourself. If your tremor spikes or your feet freeze, pause. Do one of those things like breathe, do the box breathing. Remember, your nervous system is asking for support, and you have the tools to give it to it. So mindfulness and box breathing you can do anywhere. Remember, you're capable, you're strong, and you're absolutely not alone. So stay strong, keep moving, keep connecting, and keep living your best life with Parkinson's. Thanks again for listening, and I hope to see you on the next podcast.